Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming to another webinar. So today we're going to talk about attestation for all security events. We're featuring Kelly Gilmore and Marcus Wells. So guest speakers, as I mentioned, Marcus Wells, Kelly Gilmore, and of course, Garrett. So Marcus is the CEO of Well Secured IT, and then Kelly is the SVP Information Security over at Change Lending. And then we have Garrett, the CEO of YouAttest, of course. The agenda for today. So I already went over the introductions. We're going to talk about what is attestation, where attestation could have helped, attestations and the regulations, attestation in practice, YouAttest. We're going to give a demo, and then we're going to do the roundtable. So we're going to talk about new cases for attestation. Now I'm going to pass it over to Garrett, and he's going to talk about what is attestation.
Thanks, Ashley. And thanks, audience, for being there, and always appreciate the conversation. Attestation is truly one of the least understood parts of IT security and cybersecurity, because what we have in cybersecurity, old graduate of programming, programmer for 10 years, started companies like SecureAuth and all that, and it's all function. It's all functionality. Marcus looks, and I'm looking at him right now, and he knows what I'm saying, and IT people get things done. We type the keyboard, we make things move, we grant access, we do things, and we're done. IT people are done. That's the way I did my career for 25 years. Kelly, Ashley were with me at SecureAuth, had that product running for 9 years, was in control of that, never put a line of attestation in there. Not a single line. And that's why we're talking today. Attestation is the concept of saying, yes, some action or event occurred, but someone outside that admin, that person, attest to that action or event. It's oversight, it's governance, right? And better yet, it's formally certified and documented. Let's leave it with that. Next.
Thanks, Garrett. So now I'm going to pass it over to Marcus, and he's going to talk about where could have attestation mitigated the hacks.
All right. Thanks so much for having me first and foremost. It's an absolute pleasure. Excuse me. One of the things that I definitely want to kind of touch on here was the recent event that happened on April 13th of 2023 with Western Digital. So a couple of things happened here. Western Digital, they reported a network security event where hackers had exfiltrated data from a number of their systems. Those hackers, breached the Western Digital, infrastructure, and had claimed to have stolen around 10 terabytes of data from the company. These included, customer PII, as well as some additional kind of information relative to those individuals within that organization. One of the key things here is that, these hackers were actually negotiating a ransom of a minimum of 8 figures, which is nothing to shake a stick at, in exchange for essentially not publishing the stolen data. The hackers had, provided evidence of that stolen data to the company, and, essentially had gone on to, just continue to poke the bear, if you will, regarding this cybersecurity event. So, it's super important to really tie in attestation within these processes, because, what we're looking at here is we're looking at, as Garrett mentioned, this is a course of action that was taken within the organization, whether it be by authorized or unauthorized individuals, and having that attestation in place can allow you to see those things and act on them before they become these, huge headline breaking cybersecurity events. And if we want to move on to the next slide, I can kind of go into a little more detail. Perfect. So, we have this group, ALPHV, which is that hacking group that was behind this particular event. And to make matters worse, after they had, got into this environment, after they had elevated privileges and were able to exfiltrate this data, not only did they say, hey, look, we want 8 figures minimum, or else, right? They went so far as to provide screenshots. They had the receipts. They were showing that, yeah, we're serious and we have this information and we can prove that we have this information, essentially taunting Western Digital, and by virtue of this, taunting all the customers that had, really been, affected by this breach. These screenshots really implied that these hackers had continued access in Western Digital systems. This is something that, by virtue of them having that continued access, we can continue to see how that attestation and these proper processes around identity security could have, at least, if nothing else, mitigated the attack surface and the scope or the blast radius of this type of attack. So it's really important to truly understand, as Garrett mentioned as well, and I'm sure we're going to hear more from Kelly as well here too, the importance of these functional pieces of that identity security lifecycle, right? Not just that joiner mover lever, but the entire thing, right? And governance is a huge part of that. Attestation is a huge part of that as well.
Thanks, Marcus. So now let's pass it over to Kelly. He's going to talk about attestation guidelines, standards, practices, frameworks, as well as regulations.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Ashley. And hey, it's a pleasure to be here with, of course, Marcus and Ashley and Garrett. Thank you again for letting me speak today. But let's quickly just kind of step back and kind of talk about the order of events of governance and compliance audits, just to kind of set the table. You and your organization, I'm sorry, I thought I heard someone have a question there. Anyway, you and your organization, the scenario is, your organization is in an industry which is certain compliance requirements, be it CCPA, GDPR, PCI, DSS, HIPAA, GLBA, et cetera. And of course, your organization has to maintain a certification, SOC 2, Type 1 or Type 2, ISO 2701, 2702, COVID, you name it. There's a lot of them out there, right? Your organization has selected a set of frameworks or guidelines or standards and best practices intended to meet those compliance requirements. You are busy doing your day-to-day, every day, and then some. And those controls, that you've outlined and adopted are part of those frameworks, have to be followed. And that's kind of where, you are as far as, your day-to-day, and you have to maintain this compliance. Your auditor, on the other hand, has a goal to, when they come in, they want to review your controls, ensure they're adequate to meet compliance requirements, and they request information on those controls to show that those controls are being followed. And then, of course, the last piece of their job is to document that your controls are adequate and make suggestions on how to improve, right? This can be painful. The painful part of compliance audits and the collection of that proof that your controls are adequate and that you're following your own controls. That's kind of the painful part. So how can you make this less painful? And the truth of that is automation and everything everything you can relate it to following your controls is part of it. The collection of that evidence, the verification of those controls are being followed. That's the two of the three main things that you can do to make these things less painful. Spreading that work out to the different data custodians, the resource managers, application owners, heads of development. That's another way to help make this less painful and make make your responses quicker. Using tools, of course, you got to have the tools. And if you have the right tools, at least two of those three, main things regarding automation and how you can make things less painful, can be easily accomplished. And so if you have a tool which allows you to schedule and assign the review of access to applications, data resources groups, mail distribution lists, et cetera, automating the collection of the proof you're following for your controls, the frequency of those reviews, and whenever possible, provide an attestation of those reviews, including proof that you can provide to that auditor. Kind of third-party proof there. Go ahead and move to the next slide there, Ashley, please. So this slide here, it shows a sampling of audit topics, which I run into regularly. Automation of the review and the collection of information validating the controls are being followed is what I try to do to make audits less painful and time-consuming, but more importantly, keeping true to my controls to improve cyber hygiene. And to what we were talking about just earlier, improving your cyber hygiene is what it's all about. Making sure that you have controls in place and that you're following those controls is what helps to protect you from those types of attacks, such as the Western Digital hack. And the topics that are included here in this slide kind of fall into the main topics of every audit and the things that you should be focused on, specifically principle of least privilege, segregation of duties, user account management, privileged account management, the listings of administrators for data, resources, applications, etc. And the procedures related to offboarding are always targets of my auditors. And I think that's probably true for most of us. We're seeing more and more regulations today that are looking for stronger evidence of compliance with your controls. And of course, that does vary, based upon which industry you're in, financial, medical, development industries, software industries, etc. So the goal of, not only improving cyber hygiene, protecting, your organization, the people within your organization is keeping your cyber hygiene high, and automation of scheduled review and the collection of evidence with an attestation by the appropriate resource custodian or owner of a process that the review has been completed, and that the review has been completed is key to executing and responding to audit requests, spreading out the load so it's not so tough on you, which in the end makes it more reliable that these controls are being, followed. And your auditor, of course, will very much appreciate the fact that you can quickly provide the proof with an attestation. And one thing, a trend that I'm seeing a lot more of is the different regulations that are specifically stating attestation by those custodians, and that the review is happening and that someone will attest to those reviews is very big. And I've been hearing this a lot from our auditors, and I think you will see this as more of a requirement from the different auditing firms as time goes forward.
All right, thanks, Kelly. So now let's go back to Garrett and let's talk about attestation in practice, and then we'll show you YouAttest.
Fantastic. And I love the way that's written, attestation in practice. One of the attestations that is actually required today is attestation on identity and identity roles. Okay, I mean, in what regulations? Kelly lives these. Marcus is always helping customers meet these, whatever. SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley. SOC 2 is your environment, the ISO, PCI, NIST, HIPAA, etc. But YouAttest focuses on identity attestations. How do we do this? Take it away. Okay, so we start with what is this? What is this? Is your IAMs. You have data somewhere. You have it in an Active Directory, you have it in Okta, Azure AD, et cetera. You have it in some of there. Next, we plug into there. Okay. Next, we take data that's not in your IAMs. Now, game on, game on. This is what we're talking about, attestation. There is someone on the left-hand side who's doing the identity management. Okay, the IAM practice. That's not attestation. Next. A risk manager, someone in the risk practice, needs to go out there and say, okay, I want to attest to these roles. This is what YouAttest automates for you. Okay, next. It pushes. Think of it this. Think of someone has all these roles. That's YouAttest. That's our cloud service. That's wonderful. But it has to force an attestation. And how it does that is messages out, dear user, do you have these? No, dear reviewer, someone under your domain has this access. Do you attest to this? And we're going to do this. We'll show you. Ashley and I will do a quick demo. And then YouAttest collates and creates a report. And the world is a better place. Next.
All right,
this is
let's
where we
do
a
the
demo.
fun part.
Yes, there we go. Okay. Stop. Okay, there's a little button here, and it's called share. Okay, watch what you're going to see first. And are you seeing my screen, Ashley?
We're seeing the wrong
Ransomware
ransomware.
self-assessment tool. That's a surprise, right there, Kelly and Marcus. We were just talking about this. Okay, here's where I'm saying, not only is this important for security, it's also a best practice. The ransomware self-assessment tool straight out says, and nothing more relevant than this, is that we should be doing this step right here. Adopting least privilege concept for access, right? And Marcus is saying, yeah.
That's right. That's
There
right.
we go. That's what we should do. And Kelly's like, yeah. So that's what I'm going to show you and demo how to do. Because it's one thing easy to sit there and be the guy that writes these regulations. How do you actually adopt the least privilege practice? Right there, Marcus. Here we go. Let's go. Move some more windows around. And let's go to a YouAttest. Here we go. I'm going to create a quick audit and I'm going to go to the round table. Okay, so let's go here. I'm going to create an audit and have some fun. Okay, we're going to do an app audit that's really relevant to SOX. I'm going to connect to AAD. It is 050323 already. Okay, that's my second one today. So let me just give it a name. Okay, and due date for the audit. Real important. Say it has to be done this Friday. Okay, so what YouAttest says is game on. What do you want to review? It said least privilege. Least privilege to what? Okay, and when we get into the roundtable, we'll talk about the different domains that we can do. Here we're going to do a finance app straight out, and I can do 1% or I'll leave it blank and do 100% of these. Okay. What's relevant now is YouAttest is pulling data. And think of this audience in your world. Okay, you're going to see some cool workflow. And what me and Ashley did is we were doing these demos, and I was doing this demo, or an SC was doing a demo, and I was playing the whole role, or the SC was playing the whole role, and it wasn't getting through to people. It wasn't getting through all the great features we have and all that, because they didn't understand that really an attestation, the way I spelled out first, and then Kelly went into detail, is not just the IAM person doing, but it is the someone who's actually a reviewer taking the stance and actually attesting to those roles. Okay, now we have great features and all that kind of stuff, and I'm gonna show you down here. Is we actually push out the actual things through these email templates that are already pre-written and all that type of stuff. That's wonderful. And then you can hound your people through, this and automate how often you write them and all that type of stuff. That's what's relevant. That's relevant. But what's really relevant is that I go in here, right? And then the product itself allows the attester to see that they are ready to go. Okay, so here, let's take a look. You've been assigned a task. Okay, so let's go into here, my audits, and run one. Okay, so Ashley, why don't you take this one and take it away? As for my thanks.
Sure. Okay, let me grab your remote control.
Okay. Let me refresh here, and I'll hit proof.
Perfect. All right.
There you go.
So
Okay. Yeah, I'll let you talk.
Garrett, perfect. So Garrett's the risk manager, so I'm a reviewer in this scenario. So what I need to do is I just need to go into my email here. And I'm going to click. Scroll down a little bit to get that hyperlink. All right, so what I'm going to see is just a snapshot of what Garrett saw. So Garrett, as the risk manager, sees everything. So he sees all the managers, all the employees. As a reviewer, I don't need to see all of that. I just need to see the employees who actually report to me. If I see everything, it's just going to get confusing and messy, and that's the last thing we want. So before I show you the action that I need to take, I want to show you a couple more things. If I click on more detail, so this will go in like last login date, the role. So anything that I want to know or want to verify about my employee, I can just do a double check here. If I click these three dots, I can add a comment. So anything that I want to say about this particular user, this will show up in the audit report. So if I want to put any notes about this, I can go ahead and add it there. Most importantly, the action that I need to take, it can be done one of two ways. Let me show you the more in-depth way first. So I'm going to scroll over here. So I have three options. I can certify. So let's say Kyle has access to everything that he should. He's good to go. I can certify. I can revoke. Let's say Kyle has access to an application that he no longer should. So that's a problem, right? So I can go ahead and revoke that. I can delegate. Let's say Garrett, as a risk manager, assigned me Kyle. He actually reports over to Marcus. So instead of pushing it back to the risk manager, I can go ahead and do it myself. I can delegate over to Marcus. So I'm going to show you, I can bulk select here, and I can certify everyone. So just like when Garrett did it, so this green bar populates at the top. So that means I'm done with my day job. And so now I can show you, or Garrett will show you what he sees as a risk manager. But before he does that, one quick note. So you can see the timestamp here and certified and the delegated action, who did that. So all of this is going to show up in the audit report. Let me pass it back over to you, Garrett.
Perfect. Yes. And I like what Ashley did there. Okay. So basically we have, let's go to this audit right here. And you can see the what Ashley already did. Okay. That she's already certified her users. Okay. Perfect. And then the product itself will create a report for this. Okay. And the real thing that what we do this demo for is to show that a attestation is not the IAM person. It is not even the risk manager. It is the reviewers themselves saying, here it is. I'm a manager. And then the product creates an attestation report. Okay. And what does this become? Just for you in the risk and compliance industry, this is your best friend. We become your friends, the internal auditor, right? Because you have these reports, and when the external auditor says, great, you know, that least privilege concept, how are you enforcing that? You say, okay, every month, and it's interesting, when we started this, it's more like yearly, and then it's quarterly, and now for privileged accounts, it seems to be almost monthly, people are doing these attestations. Okay, that's identity attestation perfected. And I'd say that's what we've done in the last 200 years. Look at a website, we've done over 2 million of these attestations. So we're pretty good at this. But let's go into the rest of the world, Ashley, and where attestation is probably needed.
Perfect. Thank you. 1 second. All right, so now let's have some more fun. Let's do the round table. Attestation needed elsewhere. All right, security attestation, the SASE component. So what is SASE? It's security at the software's edge. So why do events on the SASE matter? How about Kelly?
Nice.
Hey, Kelly, you may be on mute still.
All right, that probably works a little better.
That's it. That's it. That is it.
Why do these events at the edge matter? SD-WAN, I think, is probably one that I know the best. CASB, of course, is important too. These events at the edge matter because that's the first, one of the first points of attack that as far as what's coming in. Marcus, I think you could probably add to this a little bit more as well. But what we do is we monitor and manage, what's happening at the edge, probably equal to, in most cases, equal to what we're monitoring on the inside with our our IDS and those types of things. So, what would you say there, Marcus?
Yeah, I think kind of understanding what's at the edge is vitally important. Before someone steps foot on the hallowed ground that is the enterprise environment, right? I want to see them coming. I want to see them coming. I want to know who you are. I want you to call before you show up. I want you to ring the doorbell and my camera to be able to capture your face. I want it all, right? I want to know exactly what's going on. I want to know your intent. I want to know why you're here. I want to know everything, right? And so, having those SASE components is vitally important to that, and it really plays quite well into what we're talking about when we talk about the attestation piece specifically in the greater scope of identity security, right? Because as I mentioned, I want to know who you are, right? I need to know that you are in fact an authorized party, and you're not just wearing the delivery badge of the FedEx driver you clocked over the head before you showed up to my front door, right?
Identity. Yeah.
Right. So I want to make sure you have the badge, but I also want to make sure that badge matches to the person that is actually presenting that badge. I want to make sure that it's authentic. I want to make sure that I have a record that I should be expecting a package today, right? And that this isn't just some, random attempt at trying to, scope out the environment, because that's really what happens here. We're talking about the edge. What happens at the edge? In most cases, if you're dealing with a talented cybersecurity criminal, which in many cases is in fact what's going on, they're doing recon before they ever attempt anything. So they're out there, they're at the edge, you're just at the perimeter. And they're watching as maybe some of the less talented cybersecurity criminals are just like, storming the front door and getting like, swatted away like flies.
Okay.
So they're seeing how things are being handled. They're watching how you're managing these types of events, and they're creating a profile and a dossier on exactly how you're doing that, so that they can more effectively bypass those systems and security measures. So it's vitally important to have that context and understand that information as a huge component to protecting the enterprise.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed over the past couple of years, at least, especially on the logging that I received from our CASB and our SD-WAN, our firewalls, external firewalls, logging through our SIM, we're seeing a lot of nation state activity. We're not a large organization. My organization's not huge. It is in the finance industry. But we're seeing tons and tons of nation state activity, and being able to identify the who is coming at you, and the frequency being increasing, it's ever more important to know who that is, and like you said, what their intentions are. And by monitoring that and knowing what's there and reviewing how it's back to controls around who has access to these systems, who's reviewing these systems, and that you can attest that these are being reviewed is just huge. And it all falls back again into cyber hygiene and making sure that you're secure.
Yeah, I'll add one more thing before we move on, because Kelly, I really appreciate you calling out the controls, and I appreciate that you're such a well-spoken expert specifically around like that control element, because it can be a pivotal point to everything else that we're doing within this process. So I know Garrett mentioned it a little earlier, and even Ashley, we've all been talking about it, right? There's three core components to everything that we do within cybersecurity and identity and attestation, all of it, right? There's people, there's process, and there's technology. You can't really run a business without those three components. And so when we look at it through that lens, the people of course are going to be important. We're talking about the people who are not only just involved in the security elements, but also the risk aspect of the organization, as well as the operations part of the organizations, to really share that workload to make sure that everything is being accounted for effectively. Then we move into process, which is intrinsically tied into the policies, as Kelly, you mentioned, right? So those processes are really going to be driven by those policies, right? It's going to say, like, this is the action we need to take, right? And then we can devise out, how we want to take that action, how we want to get to that end state, because we already know where we need to be, and so we can kind of work backwards from that point and determine what's the best fit for our organization.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. Thank you both. Now let's talk about security attestation for applications. So mobile, desktop, SaaS, and PaaS. So why do events on applications matter? Does anyone want to take a stab at that?
I'll start with that, and then take it away, Marcus. Well,
Yeah.
we were just like, we're separated at birth, so it's all good. Just being an application writer, I go nuts way I think how we do application security today. I literally was on a panel at Zero Trust, and I was like, and I even said it, most Zero Trust people are L2, L4 centric, and I don't think they've ever written, coded, or even deployed an application in their life. And it's wrong. And it's why they're killing us, guys, right? Applications should have hooks in them. The same way that the SIMs are reporting, oh, we went from this node to this node, or we went from this segment to this segment. Applications have the same, y'all, right? You have your front section, then you have, okay, he's filling out a form, and then he's doing a data request. Okay, so should key data requested be attested to? Yeah, I think so. And I brought up Zero Trust because I believe both. I believe there should be a Zero Trust enforcement on data requests to do a real-time look at what the hell that user did before it requested the data. And then if the data itself is key enough, there should be an attestation that I reviewed that this data has been reviewed in some way, some bulk form, some way. Take it away, Marcus.
Yeah, you're hitting on the exact same things I was thinking of, and I think it even goes beyond just say, for instance, applications, for example, right? And I'm sure we can have a deeper conversation even about that. Because when I look at things, I have a very simplistic way of breaking things down. In an organization, I'm looking at identities as two different segments or two different buckets. You've got your human-based identities, and then you have your non-human-based identities, and that can include things like your applications for mobile, desktop, SaaS, and PaaS, right? But it can also include any type of system accounts related to any hardware. And if I am a threat actor, and I'm getting beyond the defense of your organization, and I've made my way into it and your infrastructure, if I'm really smart, I'm not going to go after another human identity account. And the reason why is many of the system accounts, whether they be hardware based or software based, often do have some level of privileged access associated with them. Additionally, if that system account is accessing that privileged data, it may have access to pull information from, let's say, for instance, like a SQL database. It's being told to only look at specific columns, but it can still read everything. And so if I've then hijacked that account, I can see everything it has access to. And really, you don't even know I'm there because you're just like, oh, well, this is a system account. It's accessing this information. It's supposed to be there. It's supposed to happen. But then when something happens outside of the ordinary, where it accesses like a set of data that it doesn't normally access, the attestation process is going to be vital in being able to understand where that access happened, how it happened, when it happened.
Perfect.
Very
Thank
true.
you. Okay, let's talk about DLP, data loss prevention. So why do events on DLP matter?
So I'll just jump right in here.
Go for it.
I was going to call on you anyways. So.
Okay.
So, I mean, we think about what data loss prevention is. And the first thing I think about when I think of DLP is I think of a data breach, right? That is the next logical byproduct of, soft DLP, we'll call it. We won't even call it ineffective or anything like that. We'll just call it soft, right? We need to harden it. And so, why does it matter? Well, it matters because it's literally the line of defense between that data being encrypted and exfiltrated or not. Right. And so we need to know, where that data is, how it's being used, who has access to it, when it was last accessed, how it was accessed, why it was accessed. Right. And that definitely kind of it all ties in together. Right. It all ties back into those identities relative to both the human and non-human accounts within the organization. It goes back to, somebody being able to review that access. And, we've been talking about it during this webinar here, and it's perfect because one of the key things that we're talking about is it can't really rely on the shoulders of a single person in your organization to do all of that. Sure, you have to have someone who's providing that hands-on governance piece, but these are activities that have to be shared, right? And it really kind of makes me think about a saying that I hear all the time when I was growing up was like, it takes a village to raise a child. In this situation, the child is your identity security platform, and it takes the entire organization to really have that hands-on approach to provide those eyes. You see something, you say something, and that's really what this is about.
Yeah, and being able to identify and attest to who can make changes in DLP, not just.
I like that, Kelly, a lot. Who can we make changes? If someone's making changes, I mean, Marcus, cyber kill change. First thing you do, you get in there, right? And then you escalate your privileges.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Kelly's calling out, right? The cyber kill chain is if someone escalated your privileges and you're a DLP, they own you, right?
Yeah.
They can take whatever the hell they want, okay? And you're not being attested to that change in privilege? Good point, Kelly. There you go.
All right, financial tools.
Always
So
a smart within our
Salesforce.
quieter. It's all good, Kelly.
So Salesforce, Oracle. So why do events on financial tools matter?
Oh, this is great. And I'm sorry. I feel like I'm like just eating up all the good content here. I'm sorry.
Go for it. I gotta
take this one, Mark.
Go for it
No,
first. Yeah.
This was a
No,
big
please,
one for me,
no,
but
please,
go
yeah,
ahead.
go for it.
Jump. No, go ahead.
Well, I definitely, I know you're going to be able to hit on this way better than I can, but one of the things I think of, especially within that the financial space, you have like Salesforce and Oracle here, but another one is really important is SAP as it relates to these financial tools. And I call SAP out specifically because it relates back to a point where we looked at the workflow before we even did the demo, right? And one of the things that Garrett so poignantly pointed out was the fact that this YouAttest product, what it's doing is taking information from your existing Active Directory database, right, where a bulk of these identities and that access information is going to inherently live, but it's also looking at things that aren't inherently tied into Active Directory. And SAP is one of those key things, right? The access that is provided and provisioned within your SAP environment is not going to be controlled through Active Directory. It's going to be controlled through the application layer itself. And so that's why this is like so massively important. But I'm going to take a step back and leave it there. So Kelly, you can jump in and provide that additional context.
Yeah, what I've seen, over the years with regard to financial tools, as well as CRM, any access to customer data or that type of thing. Auditors are really keen on knowing again, who can manage the systems, who can give access, who can take away access, and whether that access was correctly and in a timely fashion removed, especially the financial systems. Oracle's a big part of our world, and they always hone in very quickly on any type of separated employee, making sure that employee's access to whatever access they had has been removed, and then following up, segregation of duties, making sure again that only certain people can do certain actions within that application itself. It's something we see. I'd say 20% of the work that we do, about 20% in our audits are always around the financial side, and we're not SOC 1 required because we're not a publicly traded company, but big piece of that is all of the different aspects of who has access to what. Were they granted it? Was their access approved? If they were terminated or separated from the company, was it that access removed, and was it done in a timely fashion? So it really is a big piece.
Yeah. I'll add on to that as well, Kelly. I think when we think about identity security, and we think about even this aspect of it, that governance aspect of it, the attestation aspect of it, many of us within the security space, there are people who kind of think about this through the lens of, we're taking this action to make the environment more secure. But I think it's also important to see it through the opposite end of the lens as well, which is, these are now business operations that we're talking about. And when we talk about these financial tools, above all else, there's a set group of individuals within each organization that cares deeply about those financial tools being correctly audited and attested to. And that's going to be the senior and executive leadership, as well as the board, right? They definitely care about these things. That's going to be a very high priority, high ticket item for them.
Yeah, and how can I leave this slide without saying why? I don't know. How about Enron? There you go.
It's a good point.
All right.
Yeah.
Cloud infrastructure, Azure, AWS, GCP. So why do events on cloud infrastructure matter?
I always start with Kelly on this one. This is day job stuff.
Yeah. Nothing, back in the day, when most of your infrastructure was on-prem, within your data center, under your control, you might even be seated next to it. That's one time where, it's like you feel like you have control. Today, as we move more and more out to the cloud, you have less of a feeling of control around that, unless you go in and actually do what is needed and set up, that security, the monitoring, and all of those parts and pieces that are required for a secure environment. CIA, making sure that it's available, make sure that it's secured, and it just, with cloud infrastructure, you can't take any shortcuts, and if you are going to monitor anything, you have to monitor your cloud infrastructure, and knowing who has access to that and who has access to change access to that you hear about breaches all the time in AWS or Google Cloud or some of the other cloud environments. They've got an API key sitting in an unsecured location, which has access to too much privilege escalation, etc. And if you're not monitoring that out in the cloud environment, things get away from you very quickly.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree. And I'll even add to that as well. Many of these cloud environments on their own, without the use of an additional seam tool, for example, they don't have the ability to do long-standing rotational logs, right? So for example, Azure is a prime example of that, where it's like, after rolling 7 days, you lose access to logs before that time frame, which is vitally important to understanding and are really viewing, right? First of all, having a baseline of view and understanding of what's happening in the environment to then be able to, validate that against future changes that are happening so you can measure those results over time. Additionally, when we talk about, cloud infrastructure, like the big three here, and Kelly, you called it out perfectly. In the past, people felt like it was more secure when it was on-prem. A lot of the same, right? Exactly, operative word being felt, right? A lot of the same practices really apply now in the cloud, even more so, but they should have been, carried out before, even on-prem. And that is to say that, when you're not sitting next to those data centers, when you're not kind of having them within arm's reach, if you will, it just presents a lot more of that potential risk, simply because now it's easily accessible from a centralized location. So it's easily accessible to us as the people within the organization who need to use it for legitimate purposes, but it's also much more easily accessible for those who want to use it for illegitimate purposes. And the only way to really protect these areas of infrastructure is through proper identity security. You just don't have any security in these spaces without identity security. It's impossible to do it. So it's really important to have those logs. It's important to have that attestation. It's important to understand what's happening in your environment, as you mentioned for the CIA piece. I would also say for the CYA piece, right? Control your attestation, right? That's what it's about.
All right, we just heard of what our June webinar is. Thank you, Marcus. Appreciate that.
Nice.
All right, let's run through a quick Q&A.
And Marcus and Kelly, thanks a lot. That was great. And just for y'all in the audience, we actually did this last month for the ISC Squared a group in East Bay, but we started talking so much we didn't get through it. So it's all good. So we appreciate it and appreciate you hosting, Ashley. Always a pleasure. All right, I think we got some questions. Let's have some fun.
Perfect, thank you. So Marcus, how are we doing attestation wrong?
Well, that's a bit of a loaded question. I'm going to give you an equally loaded answer. In a lot of ways, the ways that I've seen attestation, happen incorrectly or in a way that I would say is ill-advised is in many cases it's not happening at all, right? And that's the first big mistake, right? As they always say, knowing is half the battle. So attestation really provides that eyes and ears into what's going on in the organization around the asset management perspective for the identities within an infrastructure within an organization. So the same way that asset management is important to understand, like, okay, I've got this number of machines within the environment. I know where the state of those machines. I know they're not compromised. I know they're protected. I know their vulnerabilities are being managed from a software perspective. You also have to know who's actually leveraging into those machines. And that's kind of where this attestation piece has become so vitally important. And so when you don't have an effective understanding on how many identities are in your environment, what level of access those identities have, and even the furthest extent of what identities were in your environment that are no longer needed because an individual no longer is here for any number of reasons. These are some of the ways that attestation can actually be done in a way that I would advise is ill-advised.
Awesome. Question for you, Kelly. So what regulations call out attestation the most?
One time we had a slide on that in particular, but the financial related and health are probably the two largest areas that I've seen, HIPAA and PCI, as well as sorry, I'm pulling a blank on my third, but those are the areas that I've seen the most as far as written in the regulation, being able to assign an individual or have an individual make that attestation of the review, and more, which is also equally important, that review is timely or on a scheduled basis. And that's what I'm seeing in as far as the regulations go and the writing of the regulations. And I think we're going to see more of it.
Yeah, if I could add one more piece of that, and this may be the one you were thinking of, Kelly. I know GDPR is very, very strict when it comes to identity security and attestation in particular. I don't know if that's the one you were thinking of, but that is one that came to my mind as well.
Yeah, CCPA. I'm in California, so I see a lot of what's going on with CCPA and some of the other privacy related regulations, but GDPR is a big one. Yes, absolutely.
I have another one for you, Kelly. Who should be collecting attestation?
Who should be collecting attestation? That
Yes.
should, well, he who deals closest with your auditors probably should be the one collecting those audits or those attestations. We want to make sure that those attestations are completed and on time, but we also want to make sure that those attestations, being that we have assigned someone, put them on record as saying, I solemnly swear, etc. That I have reviewed this information, that I have reviewed, who has access to what the resource is, having the individual responsible for your, leading your audits is where we have those attestations kept. They control them and they deliver them to whatever body is required as part of that evidence collection and reporting.
Yeah,
Right.
I will
Take it away,
kind of.
Marcus.
I was going to just add to. I know some organizations have actually even moved that I've worked with, have moved into kind of creating a this is not the right word, but I'm going to use it anyway. A tribunal, right? A group of individuals who will work together in order to collect that data. So you may have, individuals from your governance, risk, and compliance team, your internal audit team, your identity security team, and they will kind of work together to then disseminate that information, not unlike what YouAttest is able to do, to the rest of the organization, and then collect that, as that grouping of individuals, and then disseminate it internally get it to the right individual parties that will then document those findings.
Yeah,
And Kelly and Marcus, I'm sorry, go for it, Kelly.
It's always specific to the type of audit that you're
Yeah.
dealing with, whether it's a financial audit or a risk and compliance, SOC audit, HIPAA. It depends on that, and usually there's an administrator or a primary contact, for each of those that the auditors are specifically working at, and then of course they reach out to IT, to information security, to whatever team members and departments need to provide that information. So absolutely correct.
And both of you guys would agree with this, because that was a great question. Who's supposed to collect? Kelly's like, well, that's supposed to be the guy in risk management. That's his job to collect. Okay, Kelly, but who is he? He's asking your IT guys constantly, show me this, give me this. I'm going to have the marketing guys change that slide to have Oliver Twist asking for more gruel. Okay. And that's why YouAttest is this, guys, because you work with IT for literally a minute to get the SAML or OIDC connected, and then you're collecting the information yourself and then creating the evidence for the external auditors. Take it away, Ashley. One more question, if you would, please.
All right. Garrett, does YouAttest have APIs for integration?
That's $64 million question. Of course. That's why we put this on. Yes, we spent a lot of time at the end of 2022 going through our APIs, working them out, working on how we can rapidly. We're ready. If you're thinking, you're right. We got to put this in our CASB. We got to put this in our SD-WAN. We've got to get that same workflow you showed us, Ashley and Garrett. We got to put that in our financial tools. We got to put in our apps. We're ready, willing, and able. All the best.
Love it.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you, Garrett. Thank you, Kelly and Marcus, for joining Garrett and I. You can reach us at info@youattest.com, or our phone number is listed there. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Thanks again, everyone.
And Marcus, please tell the audience how to reach you.
Oh, absolutely. So you can reach me either on LinkedIn. You can find me on the web at wellsecuredit.com. And I'm more than happy to connect and have a conversation about how I can assist you with your organization's identity security needs.
All the best. Great job,
Thank you,
guys. Thank you,
everyone.
Ashley.
All right.
No
Thank you so
worries.
much.
Have a great day.
Great seeing
care.
you all.
Likewise.
You too.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.